Hello and welcome back to the Herbal Entrepreneur Conference. I am Yolanda Joy, and today I'm really excited to bring on a special guest who is a little bit different from a lot of the other speakers that we've had at the conference so far. Today we have got with us Yosefa Huber, who is a CPA, a US CPA, and I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about the recommendations for herbal business owners and how to make accounting a little bit easier from a entrepreneur's perspective.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really am looking forward to everything that we're going to cover in this session. But before we get started, I know that you've recently been to a conference, an herbal conference based in Israel, the Ancient Roots Israel conference. And I would love it if you could share a little bit more about kind of what happened at the event and more about what how it all panned out.
Yeah, sure. So I I found out about the conference because I'm friendly with the main organizer and founder of Ancient Roots Israel, Rivka Zulin, through some various channels, and I was interested in it. I'm not an herbalist. I'm interested. I own a human body, so I'm interested in all kinds of things that affect my body, and I like to cook. So anything that I'm using in cooking that could affect me, I'm interested in learning about. But not exactly. It's not my profession. But it was just an amazing conference. I'm so glad I went. I learned so much. I met so many interesting people. It was just an incredible experience, and I would definitely recommend it. I hope it's the first annual conference. And for anyone who wants to learn more about it, you can go to ancientrootsisrael.com.
Yeah, like I know I'm personally interested in it. Like this conference is great for the community and online for people all over the world. In terms of, I like that because I'm based in Italy, but I can connect with people all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm also really like, you can't underestimate that live energy that you get when you're with a group of people
really
who
special.
care about herbs. And
and I didn't know what to expect, like what kinds of people I was going to meet. I think it was definitely for me. I wanted to meet people that was, to go to a conference. That's part of the fun for me. But I didn't know who I was going to meet. It was a generally very diverse audience. Most people were a little bit more on the serious herbalist spectrum than I was, but and the educators, the people doing workshops, it was really, really in-depth information, and really, I think, things that not only were interesting for me as sort of herb curious, but also really useful for people who are professional herbalists, Chinese medicine, and things like that. It was great.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing about it, because I think, the more that we can share events like this, the better. The more connections that we can build, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. So I look forward to going next year.
Well, I hope that I will be able to go too, but we'll see how the logistics side of things go on. But it's definitely on my wish list for the coming up. So I think it would be good if we could dive into some of the content as far as accounting for herbal businesses now. And what I would like to get started with is about cash flow, because I know that this is a topic that a lot of people struggle with in terms of making sure they have the right kind of the money coming in and going out, and just being prepared for whatever does come up on like a financial side of things in running a business. So what sort of tips do you have for keeping cash flow and for a smaller herbal business?
Yeah, I think no matter how big or how small your business is, I think that if you can be using electronic resources, that's great. Whether it's just an Excel sheet or a Google Docs or Google Sheet, something like that, that's wonderful. If you want to advance to, one of the more professional, not professional, but, applications that are made for bookkeeping, wonderful. But anything that is electronic, that is constantly adding up your profit, your revenue and expenses, you're really going to do yourself a service no matter what level you're in, like from day one. Don't wait until you think that your business is established enough to do that, because you might not realize when your business is established enough. And if you watch TV and you might see people bringing a shoebox of receipts to their accountant, don't do that. That's not a thing that people should be doing, and your accountant will not be happy if you do that. This is, don't do that. So if you want, I think there are a number of reasons that you need to keep track of your expenses. And what I like to say is that so you're keeping track of your expenses for, let's say, number one, for tax reasons, you have to report your income and expenses. Number two, for yourself, to see if you're profitable, you need to know your income and expenses. So hopefully those numbers match. So even though the reason you're writing these things down is different, your motivation for keeping track of these things is different, hopefully the results are the same. So whatever motivates you, whether it's wanting to make your accountant happy, wanting to keep your accounting prices down by being more organized and not handing your accountant a shoebox, or just personally, it's kind of nice to know that you're making money, even if you don't think of yourself as a finance person. Money is a motivation for most people. So it's really just to take, for example, Excel or a Google Sheet. If you have a column that shows all your revenue and you have it constantly adding up, you can go in at any time and you can see what all your revenue was for the year. And that doesn't take any more work than just opening it or, just sticking in the numbers. The same with your expenses. So if and that's as opposed to keeping a paper book where you have to constantly be adding it up manually. So every time that you want to know how much you earned or how much you made, you have to manually do that. So that's why I think to have something electronic is really valuable. And not to wait until the end of the year when your accountant tells you, either how much tax you had to pay because you made a profit or you didn't make a profit. You don't want to be in business for a whole year or more before how much profit you're making. Maybe you need to be pricing things differently. So to have that constant knowledge is so valuable. And one of the other things that I like to talk about is keeping really good records of clients and data, lots and lots of data, because you're not comfortable analyzing the data, you don't know how to make spreadsheets and tables and graphs and things like that, you can always hand your data to somebody else who can help you for a small fee or a favor, whatever, it depends on who it is. But that person can never go back in time and gather all the data. So try brainstorm all the data that could possibly be valuable in your business, from expenses to clients, your client information, your ages of your clients, even locations of your clients, what kinds of services you're providing. How about keeping track of what service brings somebody in, and then you might find that there's a certain service that you find is constantly bringing people in, but then those people end up getting a different service. So having that information, I even keep track of what date each of my clients started, and that provides a number of valuable things for me to know how long they've been with me. But also, I can track seasonally when most of my clients are calling, and that might be really valuable for you. So you might not even know the value of the data, but just collecting it all in real time is the first step, I think. And then you can always have someone help you later and help you figure out, are you profitable, or what time do you need to do marketing, or what products should you market for. But having the data in the first place is valuable.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. It's just such having that constant reminder, or I find going back and looking at the data is motivational in terms of I haven't made enough this month, or I have made more than I expected. It's like a good goal. But then especially in terms of expenses, because I know that a lot of us can kind of spend a lot more than we realize if we're not kind of tracking it. And then you can be like, oh, you need to rein that in a little bit, or you have budget to spend on advertising or something else that you wouldn't have spent if you aren't aware of what your actual spending is. Yeah,
Right. I think
definitely.
it's so important to be keeping track of your expenses. I think a lot of people, a lot of like little expenses, they think it's not worth the effort to keep that documentation, to write down that documentation. If they don't have a good system, it's easier for them to tell the accountant, like, oh, this was my only expense, rather than actually keeping track of all the little expenses. But not only are you going to pay more in taxes, but you're lying to yourself about your profit. And that's, so you really need to think about that. If you're not keeping track of all of your expenses, you're lying to yourself about the profit. Now, there are a lot of expenses you're going to have that you can't even tell your accountant about, but you still have to keep track of those for yourself. And that's things like your hours. Your accountant's not going to ask you how many hours if you have a small business. Not if you're, maybe if you get pay yourself wages, but I assume most of people listening have a small business where they're not getting paid hourly, but it's so important to be keeping track of those hours, because that's how you're going to decide also, how valuable different things are. Let's say you're putting together a tincture, or let's say you're making a tincture yourself, so the raw materials for one tincture might be much cheaper, but maybe it takes a lot longer to actually do that. Or so it's taking track of your time is really good. Personally, I use Toggle. I find that a really simple. It's Toggl. It's free. I use the free app for myself and my employees. I haven't paid a penny. And that has an app on your phone. It's really easy to use, and if you're working, it'll remind you. If you want to remind you, it'll remind you, like, hey, you've been idle for 6 minutes, are you still working? It can also be a tool if, for anybody who has ADHD or has a little trouble remembering what they were supposed to be doing. So I think it's so really important to keep track of all your expenses. You can be honest with yourself about the time, money, opportunity costs. What aren't you doing with this time that you're putting into your business?
Mm. And because it's like a useful, something that is this data is so useful, like not just for taxes, but really to focus on the right things and to use your time in the best way. And it's just like continuously useful in other ways as well, because like a lot of this stuff can seem like it's boring or kind of unimportant at the time if you've got other more important things to do, but it's so important to be aware of what's going on, like not just for taxes, but so that you are running your business in the best way possible and really utilizing your time and those expenses, like you're saying, like just all of it, being aware of what's going on inside your business.
And I think for people that find this more difficult, I think being in touch with your colleagues who either have found great solutions or are having the same struggles can be really valuable. Maybe you have a friend who's having similar struggles and you can, I don't know, gamify it or just say, hey, I got all my expenses for March. How about you? Or, hey, I'm having trouble figuring out the best way to keep track of this inventory. It's just taking me way too much time to count. How do you do it? So that's something. I'm not keeping track of herbs and tinctures myself, so I can't tell you specifically, but I think that's why things like conferences could be so valuable, because you can, discuss these things and see what solutions other people are using. And also your accountant can be, if you want to find the right accountant for you. If you need an accountant that will motivate you more, find that. You might have to pay more. I do a little bit of that in my business. I do more reminding than some of my colleagues, and I work with people to try to explain to them what they need to be doing, what maybe they should be doing in the future. I think we're going to talk about documents, so I work with people to try to explain to them, what maybe would be a more efficient way to keep their documents.
Yeah, and because there is a lot of variability in that as well, like the ways that people do keep track of things. It's a big topic, I think, which we will get into a little bit. Before we do get into that, I did want to ask you a little bit about like that cash coming in aspect of the cash flow. So I know, like from personal experience and from talking to many other herbal business owners, that it's a huge struggle, like actually asking for money for the services that we provide, whether it's product or services. And it's difficult because we want to kind of give away what we have, but we do also need to run a profitable business. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, despite the fact that I'm in, a field that you might think is like super, not cushy, not like the kind of thing that I would give away for charity. It's hard for me too. One of the things that I do is I get a lot of people refunds, and there are people that I know I could get them a refund more than I'm charging them, but I can't work with them unless I know that they're going to be able to pay me. And whatever field you're in, you're not doing any good for your client if you're giving things away for free, because they will value things more if they're paying. So you're doing a disservice if you don't take yourself seriously enough to charge real prices. You're doing a disservice. Like I had a friend who I was speaking with because she was going to do some sort of a treatment, and we're friends, but she said like, oh, most people are charging this amount, but would this be okay? I'm like, you're a professional. If people are charging this amount, say it, be confident. Because people aren't going to take you seriously unless you're taking yourself seriously. So that's everything from the prices to your receipts, all of that thing. I actually, started printing business cards and got a website really quickly when I was starting to work. And I didn't think I needed it at first because I was starting so small. I had just gotten off maternity leave. I was just taking a couple of clients, but I needed an email address and I didn't want to use Gmail. So once I needed a domain name, I got a website, and, and then once I had a website, I needed a logo. And once I had a logo, I just felt so professional and like it was a real business. And, so everything from your logo, but really it's so important to really charge. It's important to charge for your services. And I'm really grateful that I was able to get some experience with this before I started my own business. Before I was even a professional accountant, I had a very part-time job where I was collecting money for an organization. I was collecting dues for an organization. I wasn't the one who set the dues. I had very little to do with the actual, what happened in the organization. So I didn't feel any need to defend it. So it was such a great experience. Have this job where my job was to get the money from these people. Most of these people were complaining about how expensive it is. So it was such a great experience that I was able to then take into my own job. So I was able to learn things like, when people say, oh, I can't afford this, it doesn't mean they don't have the money. It means any number of things. But it doesn't usually mean they don't have the money. It might mean this is not something I want to prioritize right now. It might mean I don't really want to talk to you right now. It might mean like, I didn't want to spend so much on the service, but when people really want to use a service, they will find a way. Usually they will find a way. And in order to provide value for your clients and for yourself and for your family, you have to value your time and your resources. And so there are ways to give discounts. I was just who said it was really important to her to be able to price some of her tinctures and medicinal products at a very accessible price, as opposed to her cosmetics, which she feels are a little bit more of a luxury. So things like serums and cosmetics, she can make a profit on, and she doesn't feel bad about that. Somebody doesn't need that to keep their family healthy. So that's something that's important to you, fine, but you have to charge for your time. Otherwise, you're not going to have the energy good for the world. You're going to get burnt out. You're not going to be able to sustain your business. You're not going to be able to continue providing value for people that can pay for that and want to pay for that. And as much as we might not like to talk about money, money is generally the way that people up your resources. I only have 24 hours in each of my days. I want to sleep for a lot of that. I want to spend some of that time with my kids. Maybe a few minutes I get to put my feet up. So the best way for me to divide my other hours into the people that value it the most is to charge money for that time. And I never meet, I don't know when the last time was I met somebody who didn't say, oh, I have too many hours in my day. Nobody saying that. So
yeah,
just starting out, don't undercharge, because then people are not. as a professional.
Yeah, this doesn't exist, does it? We've got that limited time, and we
For
can't
sure.
just give it away for free.
Yeah, there's always giveaways you can do or discounts you can do to get people in the door, but at some point they're always going to expect to get that. So be really careful about that. If you have so much time because you don't have enough clients yet, so use that time to market or make yourself healthier or to learn more. While you're getting more clients, don't just lower your fees until you're so far from the rest of the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so if like you do have prices and you do get that pushback, like you were saying, like someone maybe says they don't have the money, and like you were saying before, they probably do have the money, they're just prioritizing it differently. Right. But like, how would you respond to that in a way that is positive and kind of sticking by your prices without backing down, I guess?
So sometimes it really depends on what the client needs. Sometimes it's something that they could do themselves. And so it's really kind of a luxury to have an accountant. And I actually have a lot of resources on my blog to help people with a lot of these things that they can do themselves. The reports that I don't think people have the capability to do themselves, first of all, for me personally, I can say, well, if you look in this area or go to this firm, they might be able to offer you a better price because I'm more of a boutique firm. I'm like more personalized level of service. Not everyone needs the personalized level of service, or not everyone can afford it. So I'm really lucky to be in a position where I can say, well, okay, maybe you don't, if you can't afford my level of service, here are some options that might work better for you. And that feels good for me, at least at this point. I don't know if that's always a good idea to be sending people to other accountants, but at this point, I feel better not just staying by, being able to say this, maybe this can help you. Or here's a resource, here's a video I made. I think that could work for a lot of your clients too. It's just, if you want, let's say it's a consultation. Let's say you're having many very similar, like for me, I find myself saying the same thing again and again about certain types of things. Like I work a lot with people who haven't filed taxes in many years. So I do a lot of back taxes. And so instead of having a, 40 some minute conversation with every single person who calls about it, I made a video. So that, having videos and blog posts and things like that, it not only is helping to serve people who aren't ready to commit to your service and pay for your service, but it's putting you out there as a source of information, as a professional, and as a forget the word, as a good resource, as somebody knowledgeable in the field. So I think that can really provide two services. That's another thing I do is like, here's some more information while you're thinking about it. I think, one of the things that's important to think about is when people are saying this isn't something I can afford, it could be a good way for you to realize this is not a client you want. And that's another thing that I get. Because, for example, with the back taxes, I don't want to start a project like that for a client that's not ready to commit to putting in the work and getting me all the information. And I think that's probably very similar in your field, where there probably are some things where a consultation is enough, or they're just buying a one-time product. But I'm guessing that a lot of what you do is people come back and they need to check in and they need to tell you how they're doing, and you need to adjust things. So if you don't have somebody, I'm guessing, your ideal client is somebody who's going to do that, who's going to come back, who's going to be willing to spend money on whatever you want them to buy or get from the pharmacy, things like that. So if somebody right up says, I can't afford it, in some cases, that even if that's not what they mean, it still can be a perfectly good reason to step away. But again, you take that information, take their information, maybe you want to follow up another time, you get their email address, you get all the information you can possibly get from them. Best case scenario, they're a client down the line, which happens a lot to me. In the work I do, it takes a long time for, people have to see my name again and again and again to really realize this is something they should be doing. And I think in the herbal community, it probably is very similar also. People have to see your name again. They have to think about, they have to, they go get their antibiotics and then they read an article in the Atlantic about, herbal medicine. And, they have to hear about these things again and again. before they come back. So keeping that information is great. And worst case scenario, you learn from it, and that's more data that you can say, this is not where I should be marketing, or this is not, the client I should be going after.
Yeah, there's so many good points there. Like, it's true.
Yeah.
Like, there are the people that are right for you and the ones who aren't. And it is more than one touch point that you need to be able to, well, usually it depends. Some people just see it and are ready straight away. But for the majority of clients, it does take multiple touch points before they're actually ready to start either purchasing a product or consulting with that person. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, another thing that's, I think, is really good when you are writing all that data down is keep track if you ever give somebody a price quote, even if it's very general, because when that person does come back in 2 years and you give them a different price quote, either you want to be able to give them a consistent price quote, or you want to remember what you did tell them and why that was different. That happens a lot to me. I gave someone a price quote 3 years ago. They come back 3 years from now. First of all, your prices have changed, thank God. But second of all, it's good for me to remember what we talked about. And a lot of people don't, they just assume I won't remember them, but it's great. I get to pull up their notes and I say, oh, you were expecting the last time we spoke, blah, 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 or you were about to get married, or, whatever it was, we can kind of pick up where we left off. And I think that in your business, that's probably really important to show you care, but it's not just about having a memory. It's about being organized with data and being able to have a good way to keep track of that stuff. If it's all in a notebook, you're not going to be able to find it when somebody calls. How do I find it? I find it because I keep track of all the phone numbers. And if someone sounds familiar, I can type in the end of their phone number. It pulls up on my spreadsheet and I can see, oh, look, I see we spoke 2.5 years ago. And then I can find my notes. So, you can't do that in a notebook. You can do that in Excel.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about how you do that, like, because I do that a little bit with email, in terms of if I'm conversing with someone via email, I basically always search the email in my inbox to see if I've had conversations with them before. But phone numbers, I had never actually thought of, like, kind of storing that in a spreadsheet and searching the number.
I do the same thing with email addresses, but when somebody's on the phone and I think this name sounds familiar, while they're talking to me, I'm checking my client list, I'm checking their phone number. Maybe I go on Facebook to see if we've had a conversation before. I can tell you, if someone's interested, I can tell you some of the things I keep in my client list. Obviously, it's not going to work for everybody, but I keep track of how they came to me. Like, most of my clients are coming through Facebook. I keep track, but if they came from another client, that's really good to know. If they're related to another client, that's nice to remember. I keep track of the initial communication is another thing I keep track of, because if somebody messaged me a lot of information first on Facebook before we ever started phoning or emailing more professionally, it's good to remember. I don't necessarily, I'm not printing off their Facebook conversation, but it's good to remember, especially if they don't become a client, then I still know how to that's a good way. I assume the first way people contact me is usually a way they're comfortable communicating. And personally, I'm willing to meet them there. So if somebody's not responding to, if they are a client, they're not responding to emails and things. So I'll also look back at that and I'll see, Facebook works for them. We've already talked on Facebook. We can do that. Personally, I keep track of addresses, locations, but it's not just address for a professional reason. If I work with people, most of my clients are throughout Israel. So let's say I'm going to go to a different city in Israel and I'm going to have some time there. Maybe I want to meet with a couple clients, or maybe there's a client who I have been working with 3 or 4 years and I haven't gotten to meet. And so I can just search my sheet and see who lives in this area and who I might want to set up a meeting with. So, I'm guessing more of the people who are listening to this have more in-person clients, but maybe not. And it's nice to be able to search that quickly. I keep track of dates of birth. Right now, I don't do a lot with it, but potentially that's especially if you want to give a birthday discount, that could be that's really valuable information. So to get all that immediately, I think is as much as you can get. Personally, I have an intake form that I made. Took me a few years to actually get around to doing. It was like something in my head that I knew I should be doing. But I just I ended up making a fillable PDF. But there's a number of ways you could do it, and so it reminds me of all the questions that I want to ask somebody when I'm talking to them on the phone. So it keeps me a little bit more focused. Like I get very chatty anyway with clients and potential clients, but make sure that at the end of the conversation, I've gotten enough information to get them a price quote. So I think that, if people are having phone or in-person conversations, that's really valuable. And then if you get to the point where you can have even a virtual assistant, potentially you could be sending all those notes to a virtual assistant. And like, for example, I hired an office manager not too long ago, and now instead of me putting everything in my spreadsheet, I can send him all my PDFs as soon as I'm done talking to a client, and he knows where on the PDF to find all the information that goes into the spreadsheet. So I can still have a more comfortable conversation and let him
know. Yeah, I can see how this sort of thing would be really useful for a like a practicing herbalist on the clinical side of things who work with clients in that way, because it's a really similar process in that intake form, and there would be clients as well who come in and then maybe they might drop off for 6 months or a year or 2 years and then come back in, and having that kind of system of knowing what your notes are and what you've covered so far. It's really good to so that you don't do the same thing again, or like, having that base.
Yeah, no matter what field you're in, clients don't like when you ask them the same questions again and again. So, keeping that information is really valuable, so you don't have to ask again.
Yeah, definitely. So like on the topic of records and data, so this is like more to do with like clients and people coming in and those people records. Right. What other sort of data points should we be keeping track of? We've touched on this a little bit already in the earlier part of the interview, but what do you think are the like essential things that people need to be tracking, and how should we be doing it?
Okay, so for your accounting, as we mentioned, revenue coming in. So let's say, for every time you work with a client, that's pretty simple. That's a consulting fee. So I think start with maybe seeing what kinds of bookkeeping software you're comfortable with. I like to use Excel as an example because I think it's a good example of something you don't have to invest in. People either have it or they can use a Google Sheets. So if you're not ready to invest in something, I don't want to name any specific brands, but if you're not ready to invest in something, that's good. When you're ready to advance, ask your colleagues what they like using. But just to keep track of a list of money coming in. Another tip that hopefully is obvious to most people, but don't write in things like dollars. Like, just keep the number field, just numbers, please, just digits. Don't write out, don't keep any notes in there. You can have separate columns for notes. Lots of information. Obviously, I like lots of information. I want to see the date you earned it, who gave you the money, the amount should be just the number. If you're actually working with any other currencies, which my clients do, but most of your clients are probably working with one currency. So you just keep the numbers there. Don't write out anything else in the number field, or you won't be able to add up that number. And if you accidentally add something, let's say you have all your numbers, and then one of them says $30 with the word dollars written out, just for example, it's not going to get added automatically. So you got to make sure that you're actually using number format. That's the most important. But everything else, you can have all the notes you want. I think one tip that I think is really good is if you're providing a certain kind of service, if you can sort of make a menu of options. There's a number of more sophisticated ways you can do it in Excel, but basically the idea is to limit the number of different services or items you're selling. So just as an example, like on my form, I don't want to say somebody paid me for a form 1040 and then write on the next line that somebody paid me for a 1040, because I'm not going to be able to sort that. So, or you don't want to write consult and then consulting. You want them to be the same. So you can do that. There's a number of ways you can do that in Excel really cleanly, but just bottom line is, try to keep your labels of things really consistent so that you know how much are you making from consulting and you have it all come up, because it's a lot harder to sort and get more information if you have like lots and lots of information. Like you want, whatever it is, like to be to be consistent in the service that you label each thing. And it's the same with expenses. So if you have a travel expense, call them all travel. Don't call one car and one gas and one travel. If it's all travel, something like that. Work with your accountant to find out what they need to know, but generally try to come up with your category headings and try to be consistent there, because it's going to be a lot easier to sort things and get good information. And so on the expense side, you're going to need documentation. So besides just keeping track of all your expenses, you don't want to just list how much you spent. You need to list what it's for. As I said, car or travel, or and if you're paying it, if you're buying from a specific supplier, you want to write who it's from. But if you just write who it's from, your accountant's not going to know, what something is. So you need to write the general thing like supplies, and then who it's coming from, or inventory, and then who you bought it from. You have to keep, in America, you can keep electronic receipts, which I really recommend. As I said, I hate the shoebox. I'm not going to work with anyone who brings me a shoebox. The other reason you want to keep electronic receipts is that a lot of the receipts fade if you're actually buying things at a store with a cash register. But also, who needs all the paper? Like, so many people are printing, they buy half their stuff at Amazon and they're printing the receipts off. Most accounts in the US don't need the paper. So you can print to PDF. You don't need to print to paper, print to PDF if it is coming from email. But do it. Like, don't wait till the end of the year to search for all your expenses. That's not because it won't be accurate, but because you're more likely to procrastinate if it's a bigger task. So as soon as you buy something, let's say from an online retailer, and they give you that email invoice, print it to PDF into a folder for expenses, and then figure out a good way to label the things. So I usually label them year, month, day, and then what it's for, and then maybe even the amount. Just figure out what works for you. But either way, you need to be listening somewhere else. Hopefully, as I said, I prefer something electronic so you can keep up with those things. So, which is getting more industry specific, and you need to figure out what works for your business. But you should really be keeping track of what's inventory and what's overhead. And there is some subtlety there. But that's keeping track of the prices of your supplies is so important. And I'm sure professionally, labeling your supplies is really, really important. One of the people I talked to, I asked her, so what happens if you can't really tell what something is? She said, I have to throw it away. If it's changed color and I can't tell what it is, I have to throw it away. I can't use it. Sure, give somebody something that I'm not 100% sure what it is. So process of making sure that all your labels are great and all your stuff is organized, think about what system is going to work for you, so you also know how much you spent on that item. I spoke with a few herbalists to get a better idea of behind the scenes what's going on, and it seems like in general what's working for people is to figure out the average cost of, let's say they sell tinctures, so the average cost of whatever is going into a certain sized bottle. And so some ingredients cost more, some ingredients cost less, but they figure in general the cost of figuring out the details doesn't justify the additional time it would take to actually make all different prices. So that seems like the way a lot of people are working, or they know if one ingredient is much more expensive, they can add. So that's fine, but you have to do the initial work. And that's something you might want to use a professional to help you with if you're not comfortable with that. But figuring out the cost of the supplies, but also make sure you're keeping track of your overhead, whether you have an office or a factory, whether you buy materials, whether you're using materials you already owned. These are resources that you're using, and you're calculating the cost of anything you're making or anything you're doing, anything you're selling, to keep track of that. But for your accountant, they're probably going to want to know the cost of goods sold, and for that, you're going to have to be able to keep track of it. So the things that you haven't sold yet at the end of the year, that you paid for during the year, supplies you have. So I'm not going to give specific ways to count that, but just to be ready for that. Be ready for your accountant to ask and think about how you're going to give your accountant these things. So even if you're just starting your own home business and you think like, even if you think it's just a hobby, just be ready to figure out how much did you originally spend on this tincture or this herb or this whatever that I'm using in my practice.
Yeah. That's definitely really important, just to have it all.
Yeah, I think for people that live in different countries, you do need to speak with your accountant. I know, so I'm working in Israel, and Israel requires paper. Unfortunately, I don't. One of these days, I'm going to pick at that. It's a ridiculous requirement, but people actually are required to print out their emails. So really speak with your accountant. But for the most part, if you're working in the U.S., electronic is fine. But you do need to keep it for 7 years usually, and there's certain things that you should keep forever, like your completed tax returns. Again, electronic copies are usually fine, but keep a copy. If you're doing your own tax returns, if you're doing it by hand, make a copy before you send it to, wherever you're living. If you're doing your taxes, make a copy of your taxes before you send it away to the taxing authority. These things are things you'll have to keep forever.
Yeah, that's definitely important because you don't know when you'll need it, but it's better to have it than to try and search around for it later. Like I could just imagine what a headache that would be, trying to find stuff that doesn't exist.
Right. I just sat with somebody today, and I showed her a certain document that said, oh, this is wrong. You should not file this. You filled out the wrong form. Do you want me to shred this for you? She said, no, I never throw away anything. And I didn't want to be morbid and tell her, but like, seriously, think about your kids who are going to have to be going through your stuff eventually. They don't want your 500 printed emails that you printed out between you and your accountant. So think about, yes, you need to keep the documentation, but don't keep so much that it's hindering you being able to find the information later because you have too much. So, electronic copies are great, but keep it in an organized way that you can find it. Otherwise, it's not really useful.
Yeah, I can attest to that with like computer filing. I tend not to delete emails or even these files just in case I need them later. But then when I go to search stuff again, I have to search through like hundreds of emails with that word in it because I haven't deleted anything else ever. So it just is like a mess.
Yeah. I think it's just about finding the system that works for you. And that might involve writing down what system you used if this is something you're only doing once a year. Like when you put something in a safe place and then you forget what that safe place was, you might need to write down, email yourself what your system was. You think you won't forget, you won't remember, you won't forget it, but you might. So, it doesn't hurt to email yourself, make yourself a note of what system you figured out.
Yeah. And like obviously filing taxes, it's just like actually filing, it's usually something we do once per year. I know some businesses might have to do it more often, 3 monthly for like reporting and things like that. But as far as just like keeping track of what's going on in our business throughout the year, how often would you recommend us to kind of check in on what's going on, and what would that check-in involve?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know how long. I mean, for tax purposes in the US, if you're expecting to owe over $1,000, you should be making quarterly estimates. Generally, those estimates are based on whatever you made last year. But if you're growing your business, you might want to adjust those. Or if you're shrinking your business, you might be able to adjust those if you need more cash flow. You don't want to send as much money to the taxing authorities. So first of all, see what you need for taxes. But I think, I would think personally at least monthly would be a really good idea to check in, at least, maybe more than that. If you're, for me, I have to collect bills. I'm not collecting bills when I sit with people. I'm not collecting money when I sit with people or when they buy something. So at some point I'm doing, I'm checking who maybe forgot to pay me. But yeah, I think so you do the initial, you always have to do the initial, like figuring out how much you're going to pay for how much you're going to charge for certain things. So that's before you're even working, but usually, unless you just like guess. Maybe you just guess and you say, this is how much the market can handle, so I'm going to try charging that much, and then I'll go from there. But usually you're going to need to see how much you're paying for certain things, and that's an initial thing that you might use a professional to help you, or a friend to help you figure that out. But after that, I would think at least once a month you're going to go through your revenue, and you're going to go through your expenses, and you're going to see what the difference is, which is your profit. And then please compare that to how many hours you've put in. And when you're growing your business, that's okay. You're going to put in more. It's just like, when you first start working and you have to put your kids in daycare and you're paying more on daycare than you're actually getting in your business. Yes, it's an investment, but that's the kind of expense that you can't directly subtract from your business, but you have to know it. Hopefully you're getting enough joy from your business that it's worth it, but you're lying to yourself if you're not taking all those things into consideration. You have to, all these expenses you can't tell your client are your daycare, the expense of the career that maybe you left behind, that in order to do this, where you could have been making 3 times as much money, eventually you have to be honest with yourself. You have to think and compare that. So keep track of your time, look at your profit, think how much you're making per hour. It's very little, doesn't mean you're wrong. You could just be starting out, but these are signs that you may need to tweak something, whether it's spending less hours on your business to do something else in the meantime, whether it's selling something or promoting a product that maybe wasn't your favorite but is profitable to get some cash flow into your business so that you can expand things that are more meaningful to you. Just look at your expenses, your revenue, the money you brought in that month, versus, I don't want to say what you spent, because you're always going to have these expenses that are kind of like one-time things, but these are things where it helps to have a professional help you figure out. But theoretically, your overhead and your cost of goods sold, and hopefully your profit is reasonable for how many hours you're putting in. And then if that's not working, think what you can do, and you might need to be creative. It's not just going to be raising your prices. It's going to be, should I be making my own tincture for this, or should I maybe not spend so much time making my own tincture because I can buy it and that's fine, and and people aren't even asking me for this tincture, so I can just send them to a pharmacy when they need it, or something like that. Do you need to have these expensive products on hand? It can be any number of things to increase your profit, not necessarily just increasing your hours or increasing your prices.
Yeah, it's about weighing up what is that important thing, and that you're making the income in the areas that it counts, or what's important for and that it's not just a hobby, but it's an actual business.
Yeah.
I
mean, listen,
if you're doing it just as a hobby, you don't.
Right.
Yeah. Go.
Right. Yeah. Right. But even if you're doing it just as a hobby, if you're making money, you probably have to be paying an accountant. And once you pay an accountant, hopefully you have some profit. So unless you're out and saying this is a charity, and I have extra money, either I'm being supported or I have savings, whatever it is, and you go out saying, be honest with yourself and say, I think what I'm doing is so incredibly important. I want to completely do it as charity, and I want to just find people who can't afford to pay. But if not, you're giving value to your clients when they pay you. They're more committed to working with you, and they're more committed to doing all the things that you tell them. I assume most of your clients, you're not just sending them home with a bottle of a miracle drug. They probably have to do other things in their life to get the best results. And if they're not paying for your time or your service or your goods, then they might not be committed to the success of what you're doing when they go home, which is important.
Yeah. It's about like getting their commitment as well. Like,
yes.
When they invest in it, they're investing not only their money, but also their effort, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So, be confident when you're saying, these are my prices. And also, if you do have trouble, again, we go back to what we were talking about before. If you do have trouble, besides practicing, try to take out the personal words from, like, not these are my prices, but these are the prices for this service. That can help. If you have set prices, I find sometimes putting prices on your website makes it a little bit easier to say these are the prices. and anything that you can do to make yourself more confident. This is the cost of this service. These are the prices, as opposed to I charge this amount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of removing yourself from the equation a little bit and keeping the services. So even if they say that it's too expensive, it's not that you're too expensive, it's just that service.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice distinction there. Like it's kind of protects our ego a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really important. Like, because I think it is so tied into the whole topic of accounting as well, because of like that cash coming in. It's a sensitive topic for a lot of us, and then just really being confident in asking for that, and then keeping track of where it is all coming in from and how it goes out as well is just so important. And that data we need to keep track of.
I think also, when you are in this field where you can help so many people, if you do, you feel like you can help so many people by giving away a little bit for free. I think you need to try to set a policy that you're comfortable with and ahead of time. One thing that works for me, not directly connected to this, one thing that helps me is I try not to give price quotes over the phone. So it gives me just that extra minute to take a beat and write it down. And it's written down for them. They're not put on the spot, because if I give price quotes over the phone, everybody tells me, oh yeah, I want to use you, and they never call back. So I give the email, they have their time to think about it, but think about your personal policy. Personally, I generally don't, I try not to give away my professional services as charity. I will do speaking, I'll do workshops for groups, things like that I'm doing for free. But doing tax preparation, I'm not doing that for free. First of all, I have liability, and I'm guessing a lot of your clients, the people who are listening do too. You have insurance. You have to charge enough to cover your insurance. So even when I'm doing something that doesn't take me a long time to do, you have to think about the time it took you to learn how to do this, and your insurance and your liability. And I always think about, okay, this is a tiny little form, but what happens if it goes wrong? What happens if the client comes back and sue me? Am I charging enough that it's not just worth my time, but that it's worth the risk to me, which I hate to say, but it's something that you have to be thinking about. What if you make a mistake? What if something goes wrong? Just because you do something for a favor doesn't keep someone from suing you. So, it's not the most pleasant thought, but you have to think about covering your insurance and things like that. But I was going through for something. I was thinking of something else. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, well, like I definitely think that's so important. Like, because insurance is it's a tough topic for a lot of herbalists, because it's actually difficult to find insurance companies that will cover businesses.
It's actually not that easy for me to find insurance either. No, it's funny because I'm doing U.S. taxes, but I work abroad. So people that do U.S. tax, the people that are insuring U.S. accountants don't want to cover me because I'm outside the U.S. And people that cover the rest of the world don't want to touch me because the U.S. is such a hard to deal with. So yeah, I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to some of that. And you might have to pay more for that. So but even if you're not paying for insurance, you have to think about, are you like self-insuring is what they call it.
Exactly.
That's like, in some ways it's a euphemism for not being insured, but you have to be able to put a certain amount aside in case something goes wrong. So every little thing you do, even if you think, oh, this only took me an hour, or I'm just going to talk to them for half an hour, anything, you have to be able to support the overall business and risk that you're taking on in this.
Yeah. And that's it, that you need to be able to ask those prices to be able to continue and have that peace of mind as well, that you are, either you're paying for insurance or you're putting aside money or to cover any unexpected costs.
Where I was going, I remembered. So I'm saying, so personally, I don't give away tax preparation for free. Sometimes if something turns out to be a lot easier, maybe I'll adjust the price, but then in other parts of my life, I don't charge. So I'm not going to charge when I, make my friend chicken soup. I'm not going to charge when I help fix someone's jewelry or give them advice on crocheting or baby wearing or nursing or any of the other things that I might know a lot about, but it's not my business. So that, I don't have all the time in the world to do it, but that I can give away for free and be generous. So to have that line where you're saying, this is my business. And so it might seem like it's so much easier for me to do it as an accountant, but I think it's so important to say, this is my business. And I have a friend that makes a lot of natural products. And I respect that. Maybe she gives me a 10% discount, but, or maybe she'll give me a discount on, I'll take things where the label got messed up, which I'm very grateful to use. But, I respect that she is charging me, and not just for the, how much she spent on the ingredients, because this is her business. So find the line that works for you, but try to think about it before you get into that situation, so that you're prepared to say, even to your best friend or your sister, these are the prices. And some people do have a policy where they free things to friends, or free or to relatives or something. But think about what works for you before somebody asks, and before you're put on the spot.
I think a good way as well of thinking of that is like flipping it around, because if it's often a lot more awkward for you, the one asking for the money, than it is who actually has to give the money. Like, I would actually be fine about paying for my friend's services if she was doing something. Yeah, I would feel so much more uncomfortable asking that same friend to pay me. It's like totally backwards, but sometimes you just gotta do it.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I really do want to thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. I think it's been great to get into like all sorts of different topics here. We're talking about like pricing and the records to keep, and like even keeping track of like client records. Like, I can just see you're a much more organized person than I am.
Personally, I love playing with Excel. So anytime I can get my hands on data, this is another thing I can't just give away for everyone for free, but like if somebody has like all their data, I love to play with it. Like I did a graph of like the ages of my clients, because I was thinking like, wow, so many people are really close to my age. And I found not only my age, but I have a spike like around my birthday, around the season. So that's really interesting to me. But it's not just interesting to play with the data, but to know your market. The other hand is, are these the people who are willing to pay me more money? In my case, it's fine. But yeah, I love playing with the data. So it's really great to keep that organized. But for your people who are listening who don't love to play with the data, you're gonna be able to find somebody who does. So start by keeping track of it, and then you can always find someone to help you. And I also want to mention, I'm a US CPA. My specialty is taxes. So a lot of what I've shared is my experience. So I hope people find it useful, but I'm not a marketing professional. I'm not a business planner or business manager. These are things that I like talking about, especially to certain populations. So I think can have difficulty, because it's so important and so valuable, and you just want to give it to everybody. And so I like talking about those things.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate everything that you have shared. I just think it's your speciality is the taxes, but there's you've shared a lot more with us today, beyond just that topic, and it's I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Sorry, before there is one thing. we don't have a time limit. One thing that we didn't talk too much about that I did want to underline is just not procrastinating. I know we did touch on that, but really, not only, first of all, your accountant is going to be so much happier with you if you don't wait till the last minute. If you wait till the last minute, accountants they don't all have set fees. And the ones that don't have set fees, your prices are going to go up if you bring them a shoebox, or if you wait until the last minute to give them your stuff. You have to answer your emails from your accountant. Find an accountant who's appropriate for your needs. If you're not comfortable talking to your accountant, you need to find someone else within your budget. Obviously, not everyone can afford the person who's gonna really hold their hand through everything, but I had a terrible situation where I'm working with somebody and she did call me and ask me about the tax implications of something she did, and it's costing her so much. And it's so sad. And so really, like, find an accountant who you're not scared to talk to and ask all these questions, especially if you're starting your business. You need this information. And in many cases, your accountant is the best resource. So if you find yourself going on Facebook and asking your Facebook friends before you ask your accountant, think, wait, why don't I want to ask my accountant? Is that like, am I scared of my accountant? Do they make me feel stupid? These are reasons that maybe you need to find a different accountant if that's something you can afford, if that's something that's available to you. But don't procrastinate the bookkeeping. Like, ideally, December 31st, you should know how much money you made. But so many people don't until the summer, until August. They're waiting and, oh, I still have to add up this, I still have to add up that. Make it your goal that at any moment you can pull open your spreadsheet or your application, and you've already written down every single time someone pays you, you write it down. Every single expense, you write it down. It gets habit. It's a habit. It's easier. There's so many studies that show, the importance of habit. You have to exercise the habit. It might not be instinctual at first, because what you're doing might be so much fun, and you're dealing with so many soft goods, so it's difficult. I understand it's hard to figure out your inventory and say, well, do I have like a quarter left of this bottle at the end of the year? How much is that worth? But try to get in the habit of just constantly writing all the things down, and then you'll be so proud of yourself by the end of the year. I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes I see something that I did a year later that made my life so much easier now, and I just want to pat myself on the back. So do that. Like, write down all the things, keep track of all the things, so that at the end of the year, you can pat yourself on the back and like say, thank you. Now I don't have to like stress about this for the next 4 months.
Yeah. And often, like, I know for myself with taxes, it's the worst part is thinking about, oh my goodness, I have to do it.
Yes.
And it takes up so much mental energy.
Does.
And then you finally do it, and it takes a couple of hours. It's like, I should have done this like months ago.
But you know what? It's not any more enjoyable if you do it after procrastinating.
No.
It's just as enjoyable. It's just as much of a weight. Every day you put it off, it does. It uses more mental space. It uses more stress, which is not good for your health. And it's not, and then it's just a harder task. And then you put it off more. So try to get into some sort of a habit, figure out a system that works for you, speak with your friends or your colleagues about what works for them. And hopefully, you'll be able to be the one who can share with the other colleagues of, you'll be the expert soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's that versus the 4 months of that nagging feeling of should you, like, you should be doing it.
That's
or
not fun.
That pat on the back for having already done it. Yeah.
Yes. And most of my clients are dealing with years that they're nagging, that I have to get them to say, no, today's the day, make today the day. So you have to get in a habit of doing it right away. And there are apps you can use on your phone that the minute you make a purchase, you can take a picture of your receipt. So you'll figure out what works for you. Don't start with an app that's too expensive or too complicated to keep up with. Find what works for you. But ideally, if it's something electronic that's constantly updating it, that's the best.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I'll let you go now.
that's
so much.
That was really great. Thank you so much for everything. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I hope we meet in person at the next conference.